As we turn our attention to what happened yesterday at Craven Cottage, Fulham won, Manchester United won. United were brilliant in the first 10 minutes, and then that was it. Fulham very much got themselves back in the game. In the end, the spoils were shared. Don and Mark join us. Okay, it was interesting because I was watching some post-match coverage, and they were like, right, all you need to do is bring in you need to bring in a replacement for Ugarte and a replacement for Casemiro, which is great to say, obviously, but you've got 10 days left. You're Manchester United. How much money do you have? How feasible is it? Because it's clear, with these two players in the starting 11, you are going nowhere.
I mean, you could even throw Bruno Fernandes into that equation, couldn't you, in the sense that is he the right fit for that midfield? But that's another debate. But I think the way that Ruben Amorim plays his midfield, there's going to be issues all along. They're outnumbered every time they play. But you're right, they need a midfielder in. They've looked at Carlos Baleba at Brighton. They can't afford to do that deal. It's too expensive. But United haven't brought any money in this summer. They've let Marcus Rashford go on a loan, but they haven't actually raised any money by getting people out. So to bring people in, they've got to start getting some money through the transfer window. So it's difficult for United because there's obvious issues to address: a goalkeeper, midfielders. The one that could actually happen, I think is very unlikely, is that Al Ittihad in Saudi Arabia have shown an interest in Bruno Fernandes. Right. Now we know that Fernandes turned down a move to Al Hilal at the start of the window, but he's had a couple of poor games for United already this season. He doesn't really fit the system. Maybe Bruno Fernandes might think, do you know what? I said I'd stay in June, but I've seen what it's going to be like for the rest of the season. Maybe it's time to cut my losses and go. But I think that's a very unlikely scenario, but it's a possibility, although it's an unlikely one. But let's be honest, if United suddenly had an offer of £100 million for Bruno Fernandes, would it be the worst thing in the world to take the money and strengthen the midfield and play a system without him? I think it's a debate worth having, because I don't think that Bruno Fernandes right now is making Man United a better team.
But he fits the system if he plays further forward, does he not? Which is where his natural position is, or more natural, not deeper in a central midfield, because he doesn't have the defensive or discipline to do that job. Although I thought what he did in terms of the penalty yesterday was just an absolute joke, over the piece at Man United, he's been the one, not recently, but he's been, if we look at a general sense, he's been the one that's created things for them or done something different. So if you take that out of it, or you don't find a way to push that forward, now that you've got Cunha and Mbemo, who wasn't great, and Šeško, who's probably going to play and should play sooner rather than later to get game time, then where does Fernandes go unless you drop one of those guys? You have to play him deeper. And when you've got three guys up front, or when you've got a system that has basically two attackers behind the striker, you need two guys behind that can do the donkey work.
See,
it's only natural.
If you're Amorim, though, right, you have to make a decision, because the way it is now isn't working, whether it's going forward or whether it's defensively. So if you get an offer for Bruno Fernandes, you take it. You take it, and you could play Mason Mount in that position. And if you can get a Baleba, a beast, to go and sit in the middle, then it's worth getting rid of Bruno Fernandes. Because as much as we're saying how good he is in terms of what they've got, if he's not producing, then what's the point? You'd be better off making yourself really strong in the middle of the park, then at least you can defend, you don't lose games, and then you build from there. That's what you can do.
If you want to make yourself strong in the middle of the park, if you've got two in there, most other teams, and Marco Silva did it yesterday, they put three in.
Yeah.
And then Cunha had a great first 10, 15 minutes, and then he goes missing, and Mbemo likes to play forward. And so you're always getting outnumbered in there by other coaches that flood the midfield. And this is this system that he plays, and he's steadfast. Now, it worked for him in Portugal, but Portugal is Portugal, right? It isn't as good a league. It's a bit like saying Ange Postecoglou, this style he had at Celtic, which was so open and attacking, he tried to use it at Tottenham, it didn't work. Because it worked in Scotland. Do you know why? Because they're not as good up there. And when you lose the ball and you're open in the Scottish Premier League, you don't get exposed as much because the players are not as good. In the Premier League, he tried it worked for a period, and then he got caught out. So what Amorim has done in Portugal and the Portuguese Liga isn't necessarily going to work in the Premier League when you get outnumbered in the middle of the park, which is generally what's happened to them in most games.
Don, of course, you were so positive about Manchester United despite their loss against Arsenal. What went wrong at the weekend?
And they disappeared, Dan. I mean, I can't believe we're having this discussion about Bruno Fernandes I mean, honestly, I couldn't disagree more with the boys. I mean, he ain't the problem at Man United. I mean, Cunha disappeared in the game yesterday and Buemo disappeared in the game yesterday. Šeško had no impact whatsoever when he came on. And the more that game was going on, it was looking like a Fulham win. But I cannot believe Man United in the short term or medium term would get any stronger if they sold Bruno Fernandes and played Mason Mount a bit deeper. I mean, you take so much away. You take the assists away, you take the goals away.
But Bruno Fernandes, you're not going to get that from him if he's playing in a deeper role next to a Casemiro or a Ugarte. You're just not going to get that from him. And by the way, Don, he's never a leader and he's never a captain in a million years. Never.
But Craig, I've sat here since day one, and you look at Man United's midfield, and you could pick Kobbie Mainoo, you could pick Ugarte and Bruno Fernandes as a 3, and you go, that's a good 3. He doesn't play that system. It's half pointless us having this conversation because I knew this system wasn't going to work. I've seen too many teams like Bournemouth, like Newcastle, like Crystal Palace, and loads of others last season tear Man United apart because they play a 2-man midfield without any legs. So you could pair any 2 of the 4 or 5, 6 midfield players that they've got, and whatever combination you come up with, the 2 of them cannot get around the pitch. They can't move. So he ain't going to change his system, which I think he should, but he won't.
But how come
that's why you sell Fernandes. That's the reason you sell Fernandes.
And do what with it?
Bring some players in the middle of the park. There's no point in having Bruno Fernandes if the 2 guys behind him, number 1, can't defend, and number 2, can't get him the ball often enough. So what's the point? Why don't you get the money for him and then be solid through the middle of the field, which not only will help the middle of the field, it'll help your back line as well. And then you can start building going forward. Right now, they don't have a good 3. And Bruno Fernandes is in it.
No, but
the other 2, doesn't matter what other 2, the players they have, they're not good enough. And the only way you're going to replace them with 2 good players is to use the money from selling somebody, which is Bruno Fernandes.
Hey, Don, listen, Don, you can't sit there...
But just the hypothetical thing is, though, Stevie, if they sold Bruno Fernandes, it's costing 100+ million for Carlos Baleba. So you're replacing a defensive midfield player for Bruno Fernandes. Now, you can argue that makes a little bit of sense because Carlos Baleba is a fantastic player. But who's he going to play with? He's going to play with another one that's got no legs alongside him.
So you do nothing.
You're losing all Bruno Fernandes' goals
So you do nothing.
Well, no, you keep Bruno. You keep Bruno and you spend more money in January. And you buy a top-class goalkeeper for a start.
Didn't you tell us Man United... Didn't you say Man United were going to get in the top 4? You're sitting here...
I would have preferred... Hang on. I would have preferred keeping Rasmus Højlund for 1 more year and spending a bit of time in the £75 million that they spent on Šeško, buy a £75 million goalkeeper. That might solve half the problems.
Yeah, but hold on a minute. 1 second.
I think we get
Don, you're sitting there saying, "Oh, I told you this won't. I knew this wouldn't work." You were on here
because of the system.
Hold on a minute. You were on here a couple of weeks ago having an argument, but you told us that Man United were looking good, and Dan was wrong. And they were going to get in the top 4.
Dan, he was mentioning all sorts of names. He was mentioning Victor Gyökeres and Buemo, Cunha. He threw all sorts of names at me, and I went, "Yeah, top 6."
I don't know how I got the blame for all of this.
Šeško was never on the table.
System.
Listen, you're not...
Šeško was never on the table.
Listen,
they have to do.
One thing, Šeško needs to get some game time. Whatever, he's not going to change his system, right? So they've got a decent front line on the face of it. They've got an extremely weak midfield. I'm not a huge fan of the wing backs either, if I'm being honest with you. De Ligt's had a decent start to the season. Shaw's obviously been playing the left side. Yoro's a youngster, but it's not the greatest back 3, and the goalkeeping situation is a disaster, an absolute disaster. Anana is too inconsistent. He thinks he's the best thing since sliced bread, makes too many mistakes. And this fella, Altay, oh my God, every team are going to have a field day with set pieces. You can never put a consistent run of results together if your goalkeeper's flapping at every cross. And yeah, they might have played some better football at times in the first couple of games, at times. But really down the spine of that team, they are still weak.
Yeah, Mark, tell us about the goalkeeping situation.
Yeah, well, United are close to doing a deal for Senny Lemons, Lemons. I hope he's not a lemon. Lemons from Royal Antwerp. He's basically United is saying that he's coming in as one for the future, so he's another number 2.
Oh,
He's not.
dear, that's what they need.
This is all they say these
That's
days.
what they need. Yeah.
I asked the contact of mine, is he the new Thibaut Courtois or is he the new Simon Mignolet? And he said he's somewhere in between. But he's not very good with crosses. So
Brilliant.
It doesn't bode well. But obviously the guy is meant to be the next big thing in Belgium. But he's an investment, and United right now need people who can do it right now. You know, they need a rock solid goalkeeper. The guys are right about the midfield. The midfield is terrible. And just on the system will cost Ruben Amorim his job if he's not careful, because if he's so stubborn and will not change it, United won't get the results and the mood will change. You know, the mood was really optimistic before, during and after the Arsenal game, even though they lost. But if United can't get results at Fulham, they've got Burnley at home at the weekend. I'm going to Grimsby on Wednesday just in case they lose at Grimsby in the Carabao Cup. Results dictate everything. And this system, which he will not change, Craig's right about Postecoglou. It's exactly the same system as Ange, or not the same system, but the same situation. A manager that is too stubborn to change. The best managers realise where the mistakes are. If the weakest part of his team is in the midfield, he can't play in that system. But he's not changing. He's insisting he's not going to change. And that stubbornness will eventually cost him his job if he doesn't get the results. And I can't see the results coming with this formation.
Show me another top manager, either now or historically, that has not had the sense to make changes. The best managers, they say, are not just the ones that pick a team and send it out there. The best ones are that when it's gone against them, they react. They're on the sidelines and they say, right, this is not working. We're getting horsed in the midfield, we're getting done at the wide position, so we make changes. And that's what really good managers do, they adapt. They admit that they maybe got it wrong before the game and they make changes within the game, right? And they make changes from week to week. And it doesn't have to be a back 3 to a back 4, but it could be subtle changes, just something that's going to make the team better. This continuation from this guy of just saying, no, this is it, come hell or high water, this is what we're doing, is just... And Oggy's right, it's potentially going to cost him his job.
Yeah, and do you know that classic? Do you know that classic old school question that people always ask when a new manager comes in? Do you play the system you know, or do you play a system that suits the players? Well, if you need an answer to that, just look at Amorim. There's your answer.
Oggy, we're going to talk about Donnarumma and Manchester City, but I feel it's apt to bring him up now. If they're so desperate for an experienced goalkeeper, then surely the Italian ticks all the boxes, doesn't he?
Yeah, but apart from the financial ones, big wages and a big fee, of around 30-40 million pound from PSG. So
wow.
They looked at Donnarumma and they were priced out. They looked at Emi Martinez at Villa, but wanted to do it on loan. So yes, they've spent a lot of money, but they've spent up now, United, so they have to get some money in. So that's why they went for Martinez on loan. They can't afford to do Donnarumma right now. City are waiting. He's like in a holding pattern because they want to get it done. Everything's all agreed, but they need to get Ederson out because they can't have Ederson, James Trafford and Donnarumma at the club. So, so far City have had like low bids from Galatasaray, like £3 million for Ederson. But I think Ederson won't stay at City to be on the bench. So I imagine that will happen this week. Ederson will leave and Donnarumma will come in. And then City have got a world-class goalkeeper who doesn't play the way that Pep likes to play with a long ball and with his feet, but is a great goalkeeper, so they'll certainly be upgraded.